what I love.
Hello, I'm Scruffy, and today I'm answering your questions. I put out a post a while back asking if my subscribers had questions about the subjects or productions of my videos, and in a week's time the post accrued over 100 questions. I'm delighted and humbled to see such an intrigue in my channel, and I want to answer as many of these questions as I can, but I don't want to inflate this video's length. So, I've used the questions to weave together a script that will cover my creative process, my background in music, and then some extra questions. And links to all the videos I reference in this video will be in the description. Alright, let's get started. A majority of the questions were about how I create videos, so I'll describe the process start to finish. Probably the hardest obstacle for me in production is the first obstacle, thinking up a topic. As you probably know, a video in the What I Love series typically takes one video game and analyzes something specific about it, brings out what broader concept about music or audio or game design can be learned from that, and then comes back to describe how the game in question handles it specially and why it's appreciated. The easiest way to come up with a topic to suit this structure is to play that game, listening intently to the soundtrack and sound design. So sometimes I'll want to make a video on a game but not have the chance to play it yet, or an audio concept would make for a strong video but I can't decide a game to highlight it, or perhaps either has already been discussed in depth on YouTube. I certainly aspire to make more general music lessons in the future, but I would still strive to make videos like the ones I've been making, where the takeaways are placed in context of the fond video games we all discover them in. Once I do find a game and a topic it showcases really well, it's time to do research. The most urgent research is how I want to teach something. Even when I'm already well versed in a topic, I search what's already been said about the game, I'll search for official definitions and descriptions of musical terms, I'll read articles about what game designers or musicians or audio engineers or musicologists think of the topic. If necessary, and if possible, I'll listen to isolated sounds or look at isolated code from a game, though that's really only if the game is handling something in an obscure or convoluted way. This is often where I find collaborating with others to be essential, and enhance the script and production more than I could alone. And, of course, a big part of this research is playing the game in question. Every point in the Animal Crossing New Horizons video started from me just listening to the game. While I could make a video on a game's soundscape without having played the game, I feel that wouldn't do justice to the game's experience. Not to mention, I've noticed a couple commenters have been apt to mention that my videos aim to feel like the game they're talking about. And that's absolutely intentional. It wouldn't come to fruition if I didn't have a passion for exploring the game world. Okay, so I've read plenty of articles, I've reached out to collaborators, it's time to write the script. There's a lot of information to distill at this point, and a tricky question arises. How deep should this analysis go? Any of these videos could be hours long if they include the entire discourse on a term like adaptive audio, or convolution reverb, or periodic music, or if they list off all the games that have used these techniques. So, I would say my analysis of a game is usually on the lighter side, some context and introductory information about the broader topic. None of it started in Breath of the Wild, or Super Mario Bros., or Pikmin, or any of these games. But if you yearn for more detailed information about the topic I'm teaching, I love your enthusiasm, and I would first recommend taking a key term from the video and searching it. There are amazing teachers on YouTube, let alone all sorts of articles and examples online, that will take you further into the topic. But I'm glad to at least get your ears more curious and attentive about what you've heard. And how do you find key terms in my videos? Well, I actually tend to build the script around them, so you'll notice that certain terms get plenty of emphasis, like invisible design in the Breath of the Wild video. I also categorize my scripts into a list of thesis statements, which are easy to outline. That's why I often keep the list in the final video. You're kind of listening to several small topics in a row with a big through line, which I find digestible. As for my writing style, well, I guess it's conversational? I want it to be informative, but not too stiff. And though the script is segmented, I want it to sound like it flows together. It's hard to describe, but I will say I'm writing it as though I'm hearing myself read it. And I do read back passages several times to catch errors and test flow. Research and script writing and proofreading will usually take a few days, give or take a few hours of writer's block. Then it's time for something I can do in less than a day, recording and editing the narration. Let's get technical. I use a Sterling Audio ST51 condenser mic, running through an audio interface to my laptop using phantom power. I record using Logic Pro X, and as for the recording studio, it's my bedroom closet. If you hang up some clothes around the mic and a pop filter in front, it's actually a relatively clean and dry acoustic space. Before narrating, I drink warm water, and I avoid eating dairy or sugary foods before recording so my voice doesn't sound phlegmy. I tend to speak rather close to the mic to keep my voice focal, and if I don't get a paragraph in one take, I'll just take a breath, wait a few seconds, and start again. And I have committed the timing and cadence of my intro to memory. Hello, I'm Scruffy, and today, just like that. After narrating everything, I edit out all the mistakes and false starts and apply a very slight amount of compression and bring up the highs a little bit and take out the bottom 60 Hz to make it crisp and clear. If I'm analyzing a game soundtrack, I'll add breaks for listening to music during this part, because the goal here is to get the pacing of the video time-locked. Now that I've exported the narration, it's time to add visuals, the longest and most arduous step. I actually build my videos mainly in Adobe After Effects, where I'll import the narration file, start with a black background in my intro, and then for the most part work left to right. Often I have an idea of visual themes and sometimes concrete visuals I'd like to use. For example, Sonic characters taking steps to measure different types of musical rhythm. But I rarely storyboard it beforehand because my storyboard visuals are my final visuals. I doodle important words, characters, iconic objects, and anything that will highlight what I'm narrating. For this, I use Clip Studio Paint and a simple Huion drawing tablet. I draw light, chalkboard-style doodles on a black background, partly because I want to give the video a personal, handmade look that can be made somewhat quickly, but also, since my first video, I didn't want to keep looking at a bright computer screen while working late at night. I also occasionally hand draw some animations, but for the most part, animations and transitions are done using interpolated keyframes and effects in After Effects. And anything that seems 3D was done in Blender. I frequently create the more elaborate animations there from scratch. But as fancy as these are, I always try to keep in mind that there should not be more on the screen than there needs to be to get information and mood across. When audio is heavy, I keep the visuals simple. When the audio is abstract, I can afford to play more with the visuals. I keep those balanced. But I also tend to throw in little visual Easter eggs from time to time, whether it's a visual pun or something subtle about all the visuals that evokes the subject. For instance, my video on Pikmin in first person included a bit of history on anaglyph 3D in video games, so the whole video subtly evokes an 80s analog cassette tape. In my video on Sonic's music, transitions evoke how the Sega Genesis fades colors according to a limited blue color palette. These evocations can make my simple, abstract style better fit the subject material. Visuals usually take a combined 30 to 60 hours, and when they're done, I export from After Effects. Then it's time for arguably my favorite part of video production, music. While music analysis videos have most of the music cues covered already, it's up to me to create custom music to score the video, fill the quiet parts, and add cartoonish little accents to the visuals. I open up the movie file in Logic Pro X, where I make all my music, and I go to work creating arrangements and little cues that suit the video. Let's talk instruments first. I'm a jazz pianist by trade, and that's my main instrument. I use the keyboard in my room. I also have a clarinet, a melodica, a ukulele, a half-size guitar, and a collection of small hand percussion toy instruments and noisemakers. I also have my voice, which not only provides vocal sound effects you might have heard, but also a makeshift trombone, if I need one, or a tuba, if I pitch it down. I record all of these through the ST51, and I usually keep tracks pretty dry. The most I would add is compression and EQ and some stereo panning. I like the close, raw sounds of these instruments. But when I supplement that with virtual instruments, I'll add as many effects as I wish. I get a lot of mileage out of the bundled instruments in Logic Pro X, especially the synthesizers. But as of this past year, I've made good use of 3 sample libraries in particular. Spitfire Audio's Labs, which are free grab bag samples that are just really fun. East West's Composer Cloud series, which is a huge collection of orchestral and studio instruments on a monthly subscription, and only a couple months back, Spectrasonic's Keyscape, which is a renowned emulation of popular keyboards from the grand pianos to Wurlitzers to harmoniums. I had been saving up for that one. These virtual instruments are where I'll start to bust tracks and give them reverb, or sculpt the sound using one of Logic's synthesizers, and create a fuller soundtrack. So, all in all, unless I mention a collaborator at the end of the video, I've built all of the visuals and music and sound effects myself. And the last thing that has to happen is the What I Love tag at the end. This is a tradition I've set since I gave the channel its current coat of paint back in January 2017. I created a little melody just on a whim, and I sang What I Love for the last 3 notes because that video was my channel trailer, and it was all about what I love to do, music and Blender and video creation. So since then, I've tagged all my educational videos with this little theme at the end, along with the same message between 2 braces and some final doodles regarding the subject matter. And I've kept it up because it's so fun to arrange that jingle in the musical style of what I'm talking about. So much that I've made compilation videos of all the What I Love tags over the years. And as it's always different, I can't anticipate its rhythm when I'm building the visuals, so I compose the musical tag in the Logic session, then export the soundtrack to the video, then finally open the video up in Premiere to add the visual tag to sync up with the music. That is the mark that a video is complete. And that's how my videos get made! Ta-da! Of course, there are specifics for each video, no 2 are the exact same process, but that's generally how I go about it. Now, to answer some of the other questions about things other than the creative process. First, some asked about my background in music. Well, I've been into music all my life. I've been studying music composition for 12 years, now holding a master's degree in it, and I've been playing jazz piano for 18 years. I've gotten invaluable experiences out of playing gigs with other musicians, composing for live performers, putting on school concerts, working in music production, and being in a video game making club. And now that I have an official website, most of the work that I've done outside this channel is publicly available. But the most important thing I've learned over my education is that you don't need a formal or traditional education to make great music. They're great to have, but to make music you really just need discovery. So this YouTube channel has become a way for me to experiment with informal, non-traditional music education that's accessible for anyone. It's not perfected, for sure, but it's changed my life, and it's my favorite work that I've done so far. As for questions about inspirations, my main jazz piano inspirations would be Bill Evans, Thelonious Monk, Corey Henry, Marcus Roberts, and Fred Hirsch, off the top of my head. My biggest video inspirations would be children's shows, honestly, like Blue's Clues and Mr. Rogers, those kind of shows. That's not to say that I'm making children's content, but there's something about the pacing of children's educational shows that can inform any educational content. And I've always been fond of the genuine passion and live recording that goes into children's television music from the late 90s and early 2000s. Now, I had a few questions about some favorites of mine. My favorite game of all time, Pikmin 2, hands down, can't get enough of it. It was my first exposure to the Pikmin series, my family rented it, and we got hooked and bought it, particularly because of the Piklopedia. I'm so glad that feature is returning in Pikmin 3 Deluxe. But Pikmin 2 holds a special place in my history. Favorite music track within Pikmin 2, not surprisingly, is the Piklopedia theme. My favorite soundtrack of any game or movie, I can't say for sure. Movies and games have such functionally different soundtracks, and yet I've never heard one that I didn't enjoy. My favorite example of adaptive audio, at least, that's Da Blob 2. Da Blob 2 adds a solo instrument to an already funky soundtrack, as long as you are painting the environment. And each color of paint offers a different instrument. It's so good. My favorite music genre is jazz, and by extension funk, but those are such eclectic descriptors, and they've absorbed so many influences from other genres. I'll say jazz is the musical language that I've learned to speak best, and it's a privilege to play and teach about it. And finally, there are quite a few questions about my plans for my channel. I've received requests for videos on Kirby's music, Persona 5's music, Undertale's music, Ape Out's music, just to name a few. And my answer is that I'd like to create videos about each of these, definitely. It's just a matter of when and in what order I can play through them and compile information into video scripts. As far as I see it, every game has something to teach us, but it takes a while to figure out how to convey each lesson in a What I Love video. And I wish to transcribe songs of mine into sheet music. I'd like to offer tutorials on creating music in 3D renders in Blender, and I'd like to make my own games. None of these plans are out of the question. They're all a matter of the time that I get to research them, the people that I can collaborate with, and absolutely, the feedback from you, my audience. With that, I'd like to thank you for asking these brilliant questions. I hope this video has offered some insight into my approach to YouTube and into myself, because it certainly excited me for trying out new things in the future. My channel is unorthodox in some regards, but it's undoubtedly what I love. I'd like to thank all my patrons on Patreon for supporting this video, And I will let you know that if you're craving more behind-the-scenes looks at my productions, you can support me on Patreon under the First Chair tier and get periodic, more specific behind-the-scenes looks that I write and curate. And with that, I'm Scruffy, and thank you very much for watching.